theme that you're going to be hearing from today. It's lots of voices, lots of varying opinions about what is coming in 2023, at least from our perspective. And if you know TBR, if you're familiar with us, you'll know that we approach the market by taking a vendor-centric approach. That is, we analyze what a vendor is doing, we analyze their strategy and their performance, and then we put it in context of their peers and their partners and their competitors. So all of the analysts that you saw on the last slide are experts on the companies that you see listed here. And if you have a question, if you immediately see one of those companies and you think, I got a question about them, either listen to it, we might address that question in the webinar, or go ahead and put it into the Q&A chat. Now, we are not going to be covering all of these companies in depth today, but we are going to cover all of these companies in depth. So over the course of the next 45 minutes, you're going to hear something about every single one of the companies that is highlighted on this slide here. So what are we going to cover over the next 45 minutes? I'm going to introduce some of the big things that we see happening in the market. We'll sort of set the stage initially to say what's happening in the IT services, consulting, and digital transformation space. And then I'm going to talk through, and to do that, I'm actually going to put it in the frame of what are customers saying and demanding from their IT services and consultancy providers. And then after that, I'll go through each prediction. We've got 4 of them today, our view of what's going to happen in 2023. And I'll give the overall prediction, then I'll turn it over to the team, who will give you specific examples from some of the specific companies that are out there that we cover, the ones that I mentioned on that last slide. So that's what we're going to cover today. So let's start first with sort of setting the scene, setting the stage, understanding what clients are kind of expecting from IT services vendors. So for years now, we've been hearing IT services vendors and their technology partners telling us, telling clients, telling everybody that data is the new oil, that every company is a technology company. I think we're finally reaching a tipping point where vendors can no longer use that to sell the promise of IT and to sell the promise of data and sell the promise of digital transformation. They really actually need to sell and provide the results. I was thinking about this and how, reflecting on a few years ago, 5 years ago maybe now, we kept hearing vendors say that they were helping IT directors and helping CTOs be better business partners internally. They were helping them become not a cost center, but actually helping to drive the business. Well, you know, be careful what you wish for. It seems we've reached a point now where the success of that help, the success of helping transform IT directors and CIOs and CTOs into being better business partners internally, means that those same people are turning around demanding a lot more from their IT services vendors, from their providers, from their consultants, from their technology providers. So living up to that expectation and providing return on investment, not just simply the promise of digital transformation, is where we are now. To support that idea, this comes really from a lot of the research we've done around what we call voice of the customer. And with that, I'll turn it over to Boz.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As Patrick alluded, those 2 graphs here on the slide coming from our digital transformation voice of the customer research with the annual survey that we just published right before the holidays. And kind of the question is probably on top of mind for many of our listeners and readers, that what's happening? How are enterprises thinking about their digital transformation spend budgets? Where are they heading in 2023? We're all hearing about the news every day about layoffs in the tech sector and other just kind of like really not so rosy news from a macroeconomic perspective. So what we found out from our research when we asked the buyers what the expectations are, is that the overall sentiment, overall buyers are relatively positive. I gotta say that outlook on the spend that is supporting their digital transformation programs, with over 3/4 increasing, not changing, or at least continuing to invest in their ongoing projects. Again, that survey is global across the Americas, Europe, and APAC. And enterprise buyers, what we found out is that the value is investing in their digital transformation programs is that as many of them have been cascading through the digital transformation continuum for years now. So still the majority of them shape the digital transformation roadmaps by sticking to developing a clear business vision aligned to technology and user customer experience, attributes that we believe provide a solid foundation to measure success against. Also, existing relationships are with professional services firms. It's important, although ranks kind of towards one of the bottom half in importance. It is something that enterprise values appreciate and provide vendors the opportunity with strong organizational level relationship that can influence or support overall the next wave of digital transformation spend. As long as they're not just pushy to sell, but rather be partners and trying to collaborate and have an ongoing collaboration and conversation rather than just trying to sell the next technology that maybe their software partners is asking them to do so. So overall, when it comes to measuring those success and the KPIs that the buyers are thinking about, continuing to measure the success of the digital transformation programs, not surprisingly, consistent top and bottom line improvement KPIs continue to define the buyers' ways to measure that success. We believe those measures will remain in place at least through 2023 as enterprises navigate those market dynamics shaped by the macroeconomic headwinds. Additionally, more mature buyers have heightened expectations around the performance and insights generated from their front and back office systems, which is compelling the vendors to maintain service quality while relying on both the technology and skilled resources. So we'll touch on some of those technology aspects later in the presentation, but this is one kind of set the stage around the sentiment from the buyer side. And I'll turn it back over to Patrick to continue the dive into the predictions actually.
Excellent, thanks. And yeah, I think it's important that we bring that sort of voice of the customer to the opening of this, so you understand that when we look at the market, we're not just reflecting the vendors, we're reflecting what the clients are saying as well. And that's our own self-recognition, that when we follow these companies closely, when we understand how they operate, what drives their decisions and strategies, we get caught up a bit in sort of the machinations, the internal struggles, and we can possibly forget that what really matters is what they're actually delivering to those clients. The clients, for the most part, don't really care about organizational changes or leadership moves or any of that. If you're buying a service, it matters not to you very much who's leading that company. It matters to you whether you're getting the value that you're paying for. So there are a lot of upheavals that are happening in the IT services and consulting and digital transformation world. And those upheavals may provide some new openings, some openings for opportunistic, more nimble players. But I want to re-emphasize that the overall picture is the same. As Boz said, clients' IT spending is not going to disappear. They're going to continue to look for vendors that can deliver consistently. And they're going to continue to seek advice from the consultancies, possibly from a slightly different set of vendors, but really not at a different pace or a scale than in years past. IT spending is, at the end of the day, not going to go away. It's a necessity. It's a means to drive revenue and cost savings in good times and in challenging times. We're going to come back to that exact point around the difference between what's driving revenue growth and what drives cost savings at the end of this with another prediction. But one other thing I want to throw out there when we think about the internal upheavals that are happening at some of the vendors that we cover so closely, those changes, those organizational changes will create opportunities for new partnerships, new alliances, new business units, and potentially some accelerated growth for those vendors who have best leveraged their ecosystem relationships. And with that, I want to turn it over to Kelly to talk a little bit at first about UI. Kelly?
Sure. Thank you, Patrick, and thank you all for joining the webinar. To kind of dive in a little bit around EY, I just want to call out a few of the main points in the overall situation and echo a little bit of what Patrick had said. Some of the uncertain market conditions definitely influenced a lot of the consultancies' strategic business decisions around three main areas, such as portfolio, their go-to-market positioning, as well as just their overall business model orientation, where a lot of the market influencers, such as inflation, geopolitical conflicts, and other factors such as that, a lot of the firms are reevaluating their business positioning to kind of better capitalize on those opportunities and kind of move alongside their clients and just better navigate the space. And following that, this is partially what influenced EY's decision to split or their potential split around tax and their consulting. So their consulting business will go public and provide tax, business advisory, and technology adoption services, while the remaining legacy EY will focus on those audit services. And while the market conditions definitely influence different business strategies, I think this was a big part for EY as they were missing out on a lot of those opportunities with their audit clients But the split will definitely help them to pursue those opportunities and better capitalize on the changing market dynamics. It will also help them to better navigate the uncertainty and help their clients move through that. While we don't necessarily know exactly how that will impact the remaining Big Four, the Big Four's positioning currently, and particularly around their portfolio and their delivery resources, will definitely be critical on how they're able to adapt and their ability to navigate the major shift. One quick example looking there is around PwC. While they will not likely pursue something as drastic as EY split, the marketing push and the shift in their business around the new equation definitely brings more attention to their leadership issues and the pandemic and macroeconomic stresses. It helps them to better partner with their own clients and work through them. So that is an example of how they can overcome that pressure, but still focus on their own clients. So just different ways that the vendors are using what they have to kind of work through the market dynamics. With that, I will hand it over to Elisa.
Thank you, Kelly. And I want to continue with two more vendor examples, looking specifically at IBM and Atos, because, we've seen a trend, and the trend is that typically vendors that have financial challenges in terms of declining revenues and low profitability, in the past year started to look for ways to transform their organizations and chose spinning off of business units as a way to address that challenge. In November 2021, IBM announced, actually completed a spin-off of its managed infrastructure services activities into a new company called Kyndryl, and also created IBM Consulting with the remaining parts of what was former IBM services. So establishing IBM Consulting and Kyndryl as two separate organizations improves the flexibility of the two vendors, and allows them to invest and expand in areas that are really tied to their respective markets of operation. IBM Consulting supports IBM's expansion in hybrid cloud and AI, and establishes strategies around four areas of differentiation, such as strategy, experience, technology, and operations. Kyndryl, on the other hand, works with clients to design, build, and manage and modernize mission-critical information systems. Separating itself as a separate organization, Kyndryl has the opportunity to effectively compete with infrastructure services peers such as DXC Technology, Atos, Entity Data, and Fujitsu. What's notable about both IBM Consulting and Kyndryl is that they are very actively increasing their emphasis on expanding their ecosystems of alliance partners to be able to augment their respective portfolios and also expand client reach. IBM is shifting from a historically closed company that largely in the past relied on IBM technology products and solutions to now of a company that's much more open to partnerships. So elevating the role of its partner ecosystem enables IBM Consulting to expand its services capabilities and technology capabilities and deliver more value to clients. And examples of expanded partnerships activities are with SAP, with Salesforce, Adobe, AWS, and Microsoft Azure. Kyndryl is also progressively building its alliances and partner ecosystem over the past year of its operation, establishing relationships with emerging technology providers, with hyperscalers, ISVs, and Big Four firms such as EY. So it's able to deliver solutions that are based on customers' choices, and expand in related areas such as digital transformation, data applications, and security services. Atos, for example, another company in financial distress, in July 2022, actually confirmed that it would split into two separate companies. Again, each company focusing in its own respective market and having a dedicated management team. The first company would be Evidian, which will see an investment of 400 billion euro over the next 5 years, and will work in digital transformation, big data, and cybersecurity. And then the remaining parts of Atos will become the new Atos, which will be restructured through a 1 billion euro investment plan in the next 5 years, and will work in managed infrastructure services, in digital workplace, and in professional services. And the reasoning behind the plan split is that the two segments have really different performance. They have two different business models, dynamics, and strategies. So a one-size-fits-all approach was not a good fit for the two segments, and it was shown by the financial performance. So it really didn't make sense to stay as one company. What I want to note here is that really there is a good opportunity for Evidian and Atos and the new Atos to continue as partners, especially in the security side of the equation, as security portfolio is going into the new company Evidian. So Atos will have to establish a strong partnership relationship with Evidian, so it would be able to provide secure hybrid cloud solutions in the future. I want to turn it over to Boz to continue with our alliances discussion.
Thank you, Lisa. And as Kelly and Lisa and Patrick talked about, the disruption that we have witnessed in 2022 and continue in 2023, I think it certainly creates more opportunities for those new partnerships, new alliances. There's a new, just a new avenue for like new relationships overall. And it's something that it fits into what we have started observing as an overall trend around how alliances are being shaped. What are the expectations around alliances from both technology and services providers, the inclusion of niche vendors, and so forth. So the trend that we have started observing has been around IT services vendors and consultancies have begun pivoting away from technology agnosticism, more into capability-aligned strategies, which, you know, it's being evidenced by some of those sub-industry specific cloud and platform offerings, as well as more of a geo-specific and SKU-specific hyper-scaler certified talent. So there's like so these like moving pieces that are forcing, vendors to adjust their alliance strategy. Some of the drivers behind it, really this cloud migration and IT modernization have become more efficient. Clients are really not giving a second chance to vendors to prove their capabilities or expertise or their scale for execution. So IT services vendors and consultancies really must demonstrate that depth and breadth around the hyperscale technologies and other the vendors' technologies that they partner with, they're more going to scale with. Clients expect it, and in part driven by what the hyperscalers have begun telling them and how they're trying to build more increasingly important as part of the ecosystem development. What we're expecting to see in 2023 is the evolution of those partnerships, those relationships to go further. We don't expect to be an exclusive relationship, but more preferred partnerships. And this is something that we are seeing moving from two-way partnerships to more of a three-way partnerships, a four-way partnerships. The rise of a multi-party relationship go-to-market strategies is something that we expect to see. We know some of the delivery vendors are starting to partner with each other. Some on the delivery side, like Infosys, with on the consulting side with TY. Starting to bring up vendors like Microsoft in the mix or SAP in the mix is starting to become a little bit more of a norm that we expect to see in 2023. We will observe that even more of that preferred partnership messaging. We attended a global data and AI summit for EY right before the holidays in Spain, and we saw that firsthand how EY actually had 6 of their partners on stage lined up next to each other. And that kind of spoke volume because everyone talks to your friends, but bring up 6 of your partners that many of them actually compete against each other was something that we witnessed, and we expect to see more of the vendors overall. Many of those trends we continue to track and analyze as part of our cloud ecosystem market landscape, and this is where we see 10 of the systems integrators, professional services vendors partnership with the hyperscalers and how they're evolving their value propositions. And for one of those vendors, I'll turn it over to John, who will talk about TCS and how they partner. John, over to you.
Thanks, Boz. Yeah, I'm going to quickly go over TCS kind of as a comparison to some of the earlier vendors we mentioned and relate it to cloud, Boz's points on cloud and partners. So in contrast to some of those peers, TCS is a services provider that actually seems quite stable, not pursuing acquisitions or divestments or many leadership changes going on. And in terms of their overall, go-to-market, clients kind of know what they're getting. It's the scale, the breadth of resources, the skills, the pricing agility. They also have their own software and a pretty big network of partners. So on the flip side of all this, shuffling, some stable firms can maybe have a bit of an advantage in terms of their messaging. And that last piece on the partnerships is where TCS has some big opportunities, but also there are threats. And TCS has put a lot of resources behind improving relationships with the key cloud providers, especially Microsoft, AWS, and Google. They launched business units for the three a few years ago, and they've been investing in the training and the certifications, and really just become one of the largest SIs for those cloud vendors. And that certainly helped earn mindshare with clients, but it's also opening the door to work together with the partners in related areas like quantum computing or other areas that can help its kind of innovation agenda. And in addition, TCS can bring its own homegrown, off-the-shelf software to the platforms, which can help drive some services sales. But those tactics aren't unique to TCS, and as Boz kind of mentioned, clients are expecting all vendors to be able to demonstrate their capabilities. So there are threats, and some of the peers have wrapped up similar partner branded units into more of a horizontal brand, such as Accenture Cloud First or Infosys Cobalt. And that kind of gives them some more flexibility over time if new partners emerge or if some or current partners fall behind. And similarly, some smaller peers, more nimble peers, are specializing. For example, Tech Mahindra is a much smaller firm than TCS. It's about a quarter of its headcount actually, and it simply can't compete everywhere with TCS, but it can compete in the areas where it's highly skilled. And specifically, Tech Mahindra has really centered on IBM Cloud, not really one of the big three. They obviously have been investing in the Google and AWS and Microsoft capabilities, but it's really been working closely to become a key partner of the smaller cloud provider in IBM. But nonetheless, a very reputable name, and also one that is relying more and more on independent SIs for services. And in fact, Tech Mahindra recently started launching a series of global innovation and delivery centers in collaboration with IBM and Red Hat. They're called Synergy Lounges, and they're really aimed at helping clients adopt IBM's hybrid cloud and AI technology using Tech Mahindra's services. So larger vendors, need to be aware of those potential blind spots when it comes to some more smaller, high-growth, nimble peers. And really all that is to say, with so much churn and changes in the landscape that we're expecting in 2023, it kind of comes back to what are you good at and reputation, especially with the partners that you choose. And a huge part of that for services is, of course, talent. So I'll hand that over to Patrick now to kind of dig into that.
Excellent. Thank you, John. And one more point before we pivot to talent. I think another set of vendors that we're keeping an eye on and we're seeing a lot of developments from, and you'll be able to read a special report from us within about a week on one of them, is the value-added resellers, a lot of which who have begun pivoting, evolving, changing into much more full-service IT services vendors, getting into consultancy, using the knowledge and the information they have about their own clients from providing for years and years and years with technology to understand where digital transformations are heading. So another thing to throw into this, the machinations and the toil and trouble that's happening with the IT services vendors and consultancies is look out for the value-added resellers. And by now, if you're not convinced that TBR is vendor-centric, then I don't know what else to say. We spent almost a half an hour digging into just a long series of vendors and what they're individually doing. So let's pivot to talent. Every single discussion that we have with vendors, with consultancies, with technology partners and their clients, it all eventually comes back to talent. And that's not surprising. Services is a 100% talent-driven business, and quality in services depends almost completely on the quality of the people. So even as IT services vendors implement automation and management consultancies begin to offer, software as a service, talent management remains the critical component to running an IT services or consulting business. I don't know if we have any HR people on the line with us right now, but they're probably all, shouting amen. It is the hardest job within an IT services or consulting business, managing that talent. And I think what really is going to make a difference, and this is our prediction now going into 2023, is it's not just the right talent, it's the right talent at scale in the right location. So with that, I'll turn it over to Boz to dive a little deeper.
Sure. Thank you, Patrick. And just to kind of orient everyone on the line, the graph on the left actually comes from our global delivery benchmark. It's semi-annual publication which focuses on just that talent, where the vendor's talent is across geographies as well as across service lines. It tracks 14 of the leading services vendors in the space. And it looks into, it's a benchmark that provides a good sense of how revenue headcount kind of a pace against you. That linear growth model that has been developed since the dawn of outsourcing, how it's changing and what means next in terms of the talent strategy for many of the vendors. It's shown on the graph here on the left. It's really about, the last publications of the benchmark was in October 2022. We saw that peak of headcount growth in 1Q22 essentially, and we're starting to see a deceleration. We start seeing some of those results in 3Q and 4Q22, how vendors are starting to slow headcount growth, and it's really orienting their focus and spend on reskilling and really trying to understand developing that right skilled bench, in terms of when it comes to supporting the ongoing projects and also competing for new types of projects. What we have observed as part of that benchmark from the historical data is that typically headcount growth slows down about 6 to 9 months after revenue growth starts to slow down. And we expect this cycle to be no different, although vendors' pipelines have burst in the last 24 months, so there might be a little bit of a prolonged cycle in terms of a headcount expansion. But we're starting to see those early indications of how headcount strategies are shaping up, more focus on training and development, and really vendors really trying to explore various channels to develop this right skill bench, including from partnership with universities, apprenticeship programs, acquisitions, collaborations with underserved communities. Vendors can try to develop more emotional connections, really to ensure the loyalty and really combat attrition. That's something that they're trying to increase that employee stickiness, essentially for the long term, not just develop that talent and develop that right skill bench, but retain that talent. So it's, the war on talent continues. It's not over yet. We're not fools to say it's all being solved. But we're starting to see two marginal shifts that are underway when it comes to 2023 that we're watching closely. One, talent leaving technology companies and startups for the relative safety and predictability of the IT services vendors. And we're starting to see now the tech layoffs, the layoffs in the tech industry happening. And I think talent services vendors could benefit from the skilled talent. And consultancies, which secondly, they are diversifying where they recruit for their constantly churning professional staff. As the technology companies ramp up those layoffs and slow the hiring, we expect those IT services vendors to looking for people with skills in specific technologies such as cloud and AI. Those two are table stakes in 2023, and maybe able to recruit top talent in part of offering more stability as they have that, the continuation in managing the managed services space is really expanding, and that's where we see having an opportunity for vendors to recruit talent with a specific skill set that are not just keeping the lights on, but actually using the insights enabled by AI, knowing those skills in AI and analytics to be able to bring them up to the next level of opportunities as vendors utilize the productivity of this talent. Another way I mentioned the consultancies is around specialization talent and really the hyper specialization. When it comes to as a trend is emerging that we're monitoring how vendors build that right skilled bench, adding resources with specialized certifications in both technology and functional domains through partnerships and acquisitions have helped some of the vendors stay abreast of emerging trends. A good example here is, a vendor like PwC, which is known for its, kind of a professional service and consultancies, adding into the technology space, the acquisition of Canada-based ACTS company, which really puts PwC in the top 1% of Microsoft Azure partners with Azure Advanced Specialization for Windows and SQL Server. PwC move is not surprising given the company's investments in the product and technology overall, but it's a good example of how vendors are trying to develop niche areas of knowledge and expertise and focusing on that training and development of talent, building that right skill bench. Without turning it over to Elisa, who will speak a little bit more about attrition and how vendors are battling attrition as well. Elisa, over to you.
Thank you, Boz. And yes, attrition, as you can see on the graph, it's been rising over the past year. It's been certainly higher than the pre-pandemic levels in 2019 and much higher than what we had in 2020 and parts of 2021 during actually the peak of the pandemic when hiring activities were very slow. And Boz said the war for talent remains strong because vendors strive to gain resources to address the ongoing demand for digital transformation. So they're actively hiring. They're also increasing wages as a lever to attract and retain skilled resources, and also they're trying to alleviate the employee attrition that's driven by the abundant supply of jobs across the IT services providers. And we see that over the past few quarters. In 3Q22, employee attrition increased 260 basis points to 20.4%. There was a slight decrease sequentially, 40 basis points. So there is some alleviation, and we'll probably continue to see that. That's our expectation, that attrition will start to gradually decline in the first half of 2023, but it will still remain above the historical range in the mid-teens because there's still demand for price competitive cost optimization services. And there's plenty of opportunities for risk-taking employees to move around and to find better job opportunities. We also expect another factor to bring a slowdown in employee attrition, which is the worsening economic conditions. So if vendors decide to pause hiring and maybe consider layoffs because of the economy, that's something that will drive down employee attrition in 2023. Patrick, I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent, thank you. And I don't think you can miss the news yesterday about Microsoft, but you do have to keep it in context. Was it 5% of their employees, and 5% of their headcount? They had increased headcount by something like 36% since the beginning of the pandemic. So in any case, we have two predictions left, and we're pivoting now. I should have had a little slide with a robot coming across, because now we're pivoting to the technology realm and in particular emerging technologies. And again, we're going to approach this the way TBR does, which is to say, what are the IT services vendors and the consultancies doing in these spaces that we care about? And so metaverse, we have to talk about metaverse if we want to talk about 2023. And it's super easy for me to be metaverse skeptical, but that's kind of useless and it's not very enlightening on this webinar to be that way. So let me just say, part of what makes metaverse's promises laughable to me is that we all spent so much time looking at a screen during the pandemic. I'm even looking at a screen, technically two screens right now. People want to meet in person, interact, and touch physical things, which is why 4 of us are physically in a room right now. So we're doing both things at once, which sort of proves my point. Post-pandemic, it's going to be a world of mixed realities for all participants, employees, clients, partners, everybody. We can't go back. The question is, what is metaverse going to contribute to that? And that's where I get skeptical, but that's okay. That's why we have many voices on this call. So Elisa, lead us out of skepticism.
Yes, and I think IBM Consulting is a good example of a vendor that I track that consistently shows the business use case for the metaverse to support solution adoption in the segment. So there's been offerings and examples with clients around specific business value and specific value propositions across industries. But before IBM, provides the use cases, it really works on setting the direction by providing a definition of what's behind the metaverse. So according to IBM, the metaverse is not about one or two technologies that are involved in the solution. It's a promise to build on a new set of values. And those values are connections, commerce, consent, collaboration, community, and co-presence. And collectively, those values drive the idea of co-reality, which is the metaverse. And we've seen IBM sharing multiple use cases for the metaverse across industries, but I want to call out specifically financial services and the telcos, which are one of the leading segments that are showing increased interest in adoption of IBM's metaverse-related solutions. And some examples of use cases can be metaverse commerce, in which IBM provides a 3D virtual storefront for VR and AR that's connected to an omnichannel experience through the IBM Interactive Experience Orchestrator solution. There's also the metaverse workplace, where employees and customers can meet through secure web, AR or VR-based 3D virtual spaces. And there's also a metaverse branch, which provides optimized virtual spaces for real-time communication and tasks based on public platforms and virtual worlds. And one good example of a metaverse branch is IBM Consulting's work with a hospital in Japan, where IBM created a digital twin of the hospital that was made accessible to patients that want to learn and experience the hospital before they go to the hospital and understand what's going to happen during their stay. For example, they want to know what it feels to have a CT scan and what the process is like before they get into the hospital, so they're more comfortable with the process and gain more understanding of what's happening while they will stay there. And I also want to call out that for IBM, the metaverse, the focus around the metaverse is around business value. It's around user value and also approaches the solutions with a sustainable mindset in place. For example, on the sustainability side, IBM often tries to use web-powered solutions instead of pixel streaming, which can usually be expensive from cost and sustainability standpoint. Now I turn it over to Megan.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about Microsoft. So I think Microsoft holds a pretty competitive position within the metaverse market, both in part from its strong partner network and its broad catalog of application and cloud solutions, as well as their security services and their devices, all of which work hand in hand to support AR and VR enabled environments. So mirroring what Patrick was talking about, clients, partners, and staff, they all want to increase their in-person engagements, but remote and hybrid work environments obviously makes it challenging. So Microsoft really has used their productivity and business process offerings, which made up roughly about 33% of the company's total revenue in 3Q22. So using these and pairing them with metaverse expertise of partners to really enable businesses and professionals to have more personal interactions. A great example of this is Microsoft's partnership with Meta, through which the pair announced that the mesh for Microsoft Teams and Microsoft 365 will both be available on Metaverse Quest devices, which allows users to collaborate virtually. Alongside this, allowing these solutions on partner hardware broadens Microsoft's applications install base. HoloLens also provides this opportunity for Microsoft, but through its own vehicle to the metaverse. So alongside supporting business processes, these devices will be useful in complementing Microsoft's investments in gaming, as is done through Game Pass updates and acquisitions, including the ongoing Activision Blizzard deal. So paired with accelerating security services and technologies, which help to mitigate phishing and fraud attacks, these factors enable Microsoft to provide host and secure mixed reality environments for both business use cases and for personal consumption.
However, Microsoft ceased the development of HoloLens 3 about a year ago in February in favor of expanding its partnerships like it's done with Meta and Samsung, which indicates Microsoft likely cares less about the device used as long as their platform enables the environment. Another important layer to consider is Microsoft's infrastructure expertise, which will be a necessity in providing the required data and compute storage as part of running the metaverse. This, paired with value-add capabilities like natural language processing, will increase Azure growth. As the demand for metaverse grows, I think Microsoft will need to leverage its SI and service partners to offset its weaker professional services business compared to, say, like AWS, to help users transition to these new environments. In my opinion, Wipro is promising. They're a promising partner as its dedicated Microsoft business unit and its broad technology tool belt through full-stride cloud services, which includes anywhere from digital engineering to data to AI and, of course, metaverse capabilities. They will be particularly useful for Microsoft as it moves forward in the multi-reality market. So on to Kelly.
Thanks, Megan. I just wanted to throw in a quick example here on the metaverse. It's kind of a bit different from what we've heard so far. Looking at it from kind of a slower investment approach, I want to call it EY here. Back in early 2022, EY had launched its or showcased its metaverse technology, which basically enabled users to meet in a digital setting so you could communicate, you could move around. While it's not quite as aggressive as its peers have been, they've also added their wave-based technology to it. So it's working with clients to kind of show their solutions a bit more closely, to show new business models, new solutions, just kind of how you can use the platform differently and just use different applications. While the launch of this is much slower than some of the peers, it's not quite an active or an aggressive investment area for EY, but it is helping EY to increase and strengthen its value proposition through those faster transformations, creating more collaboration, and just helping to facilitate conversations with clients despite the increase in travel, but it still provides yet another opportunity for them. And I'll hand it over to Bob.
Thank you, Kelly. And maybe just in a contrast here, a company that likes to make big splashy announcements and take advantage of is Accenture. And they're certainly very bullish on the metaverse. Just about a year ago, as part of their Technology Vision 2022, one of their kind of looking forward initiatives is Meet Me in the Metaverse. And really something that Accenture is like really putting the money where their mouth is, basically, in terms of investment, in terms of partnerships. Even we're hearing from this week at Davos at the World Economic Forum, they have a metaverse set up with Microsoft, trying to bring up and develop use cases. Again, as Patrick said, it's easy for us to be skeptics, but there's some investments that it's worth noting that Accenture has done, along with the announcement last year from their Technology Vision. They launched the Metaverse Continuum Business Group, very small initially, about 800 people, which in Accenture terms is nothing. It's minuscule, over 750,000 people organization. So again, led by the CTO, Paul Daugherty, and David Droga, who is the head of the Accenture SONC, formerly Accenture Interactive Unit. Since then, they've done a couple of announcements and investments that are worth noting, one of which is through the Accenture Venture arm. Partner invested in a startup called Stiver, which is a VR-based immersive learning and training solution platform for enterprises, again, bolstering Accenture's HR consulting value proposition. Similarly, taking some of those lessons learned from that investment and that partnership, applied some of to their own staff. Essentially, Accenture has begun applying and really building its own metaverse. They call it the Nth Floor, where the new employees can explore a digital twin-powered virtual campus called One Accenture Park. The virtual campus is really allowing the new employees to tour offices, meet new colleagues and clients using AR and VR technologies. Really, the debate continues around the long-term practicality around AR-based training and client engagement. We expect Accenture to continue to integrate One Accenture Park into the new physical delivery center to maintain its culture and its innovation. So for Accenture, what they do and how they do it, looking at the next wave of The AR and VR headsets, I think, will be a kind of important evolution. We know that, Accenture's one of the biggest clients is, Meta. We know how they feel about the metaverse, so it's certainly something that, those two may have something in common, but may not. We're here to analyze and see how it progresses. I'll turn it back over to Patrick for a moment. And on the last prediction.
Excellent, thank you. And the less I say about the metaverse, probably the better. So, it's our last prediction, and I want to circle back to kind of where we were at the beginning, and that's talking about the clients and how they're driving a lot of what's happening within the IT services and consulting space and digital transformation. And sort of based on everything we've talked about so far, what we think is happening now is that the vendors that we cover have to be very careful about messaging digital transformation growth in contrast to cost containment. We're all coming out of the pandemic. We know what the differences are, and we all know a lot more about supply chain than we ever wanted to. We understand that there are significant differences between a growth strategy and a cost containment strategy. Artificial intelligence is focused on the former. Automation is focused on the latter. Both are necessary, but they're being sold to different stakeholders on different terms with different expectations, particularly as the prevalence of AI and automation increases across large enterprises. So what do I mean by that? I mean that different stakeholders are buying AI for different things within each enterprise. Different stakeholders are buying automation solutions for different things within each enterprise. That is the complicated picture that the IT services vendors and the consultancies have to deal with. Layer on top of that no one is actually providing AI and automation on their own. They're working in an ecosystem. So we're sort of tying it all back together. What are the clients demanding? What are the services vendors actually providing? How are they partnering? And with that, I'll turn it back again to Boss.
Thank you, Patrick. And maybe just a good way to kind of wrap up in that discussion will be thinking about, again, digital transformation programs, how they continue to accelerate and really largely enabled by cloud, and buyers need to modernize their IT architecture. That's really driving adoption of AI-based tools and analytics services at scale, and which increasingly requires broader collaboration between the ecosystem participants, as the implication of technology's complexities include not only data science, but also IT operations and business processes. So developing and demonstrating industry-aligned use cases backed by pointed solutions, it's increasingly becoming table stakes, as buyers need assistance in integrating and managing those vertically compliant data coming from multiple data sources such as IoT and Edge and 5G. So this is kind of like the bigger picture. The graph on the left provides a good example of buyers, again, the digital transformation objectives, where they are today, how they plan to invest in the next couple of years, and really thinking about the role of AI and automation. So IT operations are maturing. They're certainly table stakes. And they're really ripe for automation. It's all about cost efficiency, especially with the macroeconomic headwinds knocking our doors. It's a good opportunity for automation, for RPA-based tools to show the value of automation. Buyers cannot afford to not invest in automation because this is the solution, this is the tools that will show them the inefficiencies of their IT operations. So really, as mature and transformed those IT operations are, this is the next wave. This is really the opportunity there. Supply chain, due for disruption. Analytics certainly can help with insights and setting new data architecture frameworks to optimize. We all been hearing about supply chain disruption in the last couple of years since the pandemic, and certainly there's a great opportunity for analytics tools to be extracted and provide insights of those efficiencies along the way. Customer experience, sales, and services. That was an objective that we were a little bit surprised. They dropped in importance for the last round of survey that we did in end of 2022. But it's also, if you think about it, it's a mature process. When digital transformation programs started 7-10 years ago, when we first started hearing about it, everyone went into CX optimization. Everyone went into sales optimization because this is how you drive customer experience. This is how you try to bring in new customers through websites and, better e-commerce and all that stuff. So it dropped in priority. But we also seen some of the technology vendors like Microsoft and SAP and Oracle investing in Salesforce and developing those like more consolidated assets, software assets in the front end in terms of like how they bring the sales, service, and customer experience together, trying to be more strategic when it comes to advertising and marketing tools that they offer to their services partners that can bring to bear, which to us, it's all about the next wave around customer experience, sales experience, service experience, and so forth. Thinking about Chat GPT, right? What's going on with that? Everybody's talking about. This is about, acceleration in the use of AI and how, someone like Microsoft is really investing in that technology, how that's going to improve the next wave of customer experience. So these are some of kind of the pieces from a buyer perspective where we see opportunities for both automation tools like the RPA, kind of a mundane tasks optimization, but also the AI for the next wave of customer experience. The bubble graph on the right is from our Analytics and Insights Professional Services benchmark. And this benchmark, it provides a good sense of about 21 vendors in that services space that we track on a semi-annual basis what's going on in that space and how vendors are making money in that particular domain. We believe the acceleration and the overall, set the stage here is that the AI services, the Analytics and Insights Services revenue is growing faster than overall IT services revenue. So we believe this acceleration in the performance indicates a gradual stabilization of buyers' trust in the vendor's ability to develop robust analytics models. Further, innovation-centric initiatives, both from newly conceived and re-emerging from pre-pandemic times, like including sustainability in the metaverse and smart cities and IoT edge, 5G, will pave the way for sustained double-digit revenue growth across the service lines within the Analytics and Insight Services space, provided those vendors can overcome fundamental issues, including poor data quality, lack of privacy, and skills shortages. Vendors must also remain aware of potential recession. We've been talking about for the last hour, which could cool buyer sentiment and compel the buyers to secure monetization of the AI platforms, either by embedding IP with managed services to differentiate from outsourcing competitors, or selling IP as a standalone software while demonstrating a tangible ROI tied to business outcome. It's all about ROI. It's time for AI, time for automation to demonstrate the AI, and vendors they have the opportunity, that they have built the trust. Buyers are ready to spend on the technology. How do you demonstrate that ROI? So there's certainly avenues to explore. As the analytics services opportunity continues to grow, though, established vendors must account for new contenders, especially those offering higher value and niche capabilities. In the past, this is the role of the niche vendors, the local vendors, and how vendors partner with them. But also, while in the past decade, we've seen a boom in the startups vying for venture capital, a downturn could weed out those that were overhyped and present an opportunity for the rest, which will demonstrate not only growth, but the value that supports those buyers' digital transformation program and IT operations transformation. So I think it's the reset that we may be facing in 2023 will really elevate and bring up the opportunity that AI presents, and just an overall automation and demonstration of ROI. And that's kind of wrap up that section in particular. I'll turn it over to Kelly for some insights on Fujitsu.
Sure, thank you, Boz. I just want to call out Fujitsu in this example here. When looking at the turbulent market conditions, we've talked a bit about the uncertainty around different regions. Fujitsu has been able to maintain a relatively stable overall value proposition around analytics and AI. Things that have kind of helped support this. Back in April 2021, Fujitsu acquired Verser, which is a Melbourne, Australia-based analytics management consulting firm. Well, the company merged with Fujitsu's Australia firm. It illustrates the company's emphasis around digital transformation, but also focusing on that data and that analytics piece. So it helps them maintain that stability while also bringing in some of the different capabilities and bringing additional services for which they can use toward data, as well as bolster their digital transformation services. Partnerships as well, such as around research, in particular research and academia partnerships, have also enabled Fujitsu to kind of maintain a more innovative portfolio within this space and really build out their portfolio. With that, I will hand it over to John.
Thanks. Going to quickly mention TCS. Boz talked a little bit about AI or IT operations, and that's a pretty big area for TCS. They have their AI ops software, Ignio. It's been on the market for a long time, and it's continued to invest in building the brand. They actually have a separate subsidiary that owns Ignio, and in addition to that, they have a network of independent integrators that have helped it kind of grow its market share. But aside from that, there's also the embedded technology that TCS is working towards. They see kind of DT in a few horizons, the first being the move to cloud, the second kind of being more adoption of more advanced technologies, including AI and analytics. And so in an effort to bridge that gap, they've done a few things. And one good example is the machine first delivery model that they use in a lot of their engagements, basically using AI and automation to assess existing networks and provide recommendations for enhancements. And that's built right in, seems to resonate with clients, and there could be some cost savings and save time as long as they're on the same page about the benefits, the drawbacks, and ultimately having a consultant for the final say. So I'll hand it over to Kevin now in the interest of time.
Hey, thanks, John. Appreciate that. I'll go ahead and do this as brief as I can, kind of wrap up our vendor look. Just wanted to take a quick moment and, give a bit of a contrasting view to some of the market leaders we've talked about, with a bit of a market laggard as of recently, DXC. Compared to the constant growth to, say, Accenture, north of, I think Boz said 750,000 employees and a market cap approaching 200 billion, DXC, since its formation, it's been contracting, and, only 130,000 employees and a market cap closer to, say 7 billion. So rather than being able to invest both organically and inorganically in, several areas at once, DXC has to be much more selective in its strategy and, much more price conscious around those internal spending. Shortly after its formation, DXC developed a global automation program it named Bionics at the time. Now it's known as Platform X. It was initially internally focused, on replacing manual tasks with automated scripts to minimize the labor required to support and run IT environments. Like many automation platforms, it was eventually productized and it was rolled out to clients as an offering, which helps recuperate some of those initial internal investments. Additionally, as DXC's core legacy business faces ongoing pricing pressures from low-cost, offshore, heavy peers, or just generalized commoditization in the IT infrastructure, internal automation, also helps what Patrick had alluded to earlier, that cost containment piece. DXC has noted that automations has reduced that headcount required to support and run those IT environments, and they are leveraging predictive analytics, and it's resulted in reduced incidents by up to 70, in certain cases, up to 70%. With an uncertain future for DXC, as takeover rumors persist and DXC shares financials with potential suitors, profitability is a key metric for them to have to share, and it's an area that automation and analytics, can really add value. I'll go ahead and pause there, and I'll turn it back over.
Excellent, thank you. And I know we're up against time, and I appreciate everybody joining. There will be an opportunity to get these slides if you want them and listen to a replay. But while we have everybody here, I do just want to take one question that came to us actually ahead of time. On LinkedIn, someone reached out to me when they saw what the topic was going to be, and they sent a question. And in order to answer it, we have to have a special guest come on. So let me read the question first, and then we'll introduce a special guest. It's what to expect from a more integrated control over IoT edge cloud with shared CPU and RAM, aiming at extending lifetime of equipment, reducing need for resources, ? So that's the question statement kind of thing that's out there, and we'll turn now to Evan Wallacott to give us his take on that question. Evan?
Thanks, Patrick, and I'll try to be brief on this given the time. So if you think about what's happened over the past couple of years, there was a fairly aggressive race to cloud in order to kind of ensure business continuity. But what we're seeing now is a bit more of that sticker shock as organizations realize how much these environments cost, especially if you're not just using, say, Microsoft for infrastructure, but also having used them for SaaS and then PaaS as they value add or layer value add capabilities throughout those app suites. So if you think about that growing concern and the fact that we're seeing in customer research we've done through cloud more desire, so to speak, for third-party support in optimizing their billing, licensing, and so forth to get better control over their costs, in addition to cloud sprawl, so to consolidate around consolidate licenses where they can if they have overlapping capabilities being served by multiple vendors. So if you now consider that in the context of, this IoT edge kind of cloud question, in short, I mean, the answer isn't always cloud, especially if you start to look at, if you think about, we often talk about how stadiums are a good microcosm for doing these DT aspirations because it's an isolated area. If you think about that in the context of, say, a smart city, it's also sort of analogous because given the number of, smart city stakeholders which exist across each city, with each stakeholder obviously having vastly different needs and, pain points they're trying to address with solutions. So if you go down to the device level, in order to understand kind of where the compute and storage and so forth should be occurring, you need to kind of first understand, okay, well, what's the use case? Because that's going to tell you, okay, this is the relevant data and this is how much data is going to be coming. And is it capable of being done at the edge versus being transmitted to the cloud? It's going to be extremely cost intensive to say transfer, thousands of lines of data being produced per second from machines to the public cloud. You're going to pay insane fees. But if you can do some of those low complexity use cases at the edge, think of like a smart parking use case where it's just triggering that there's an open spot somewhere, as opposed to relying on the public cloud to kind of inform those analytics. It's in short, the answer is going to be mixed, and the only way to understand how it's going to be managed is to first you have to understand the use case, understand which devices are then involved, and then from there understand which data is going to be present and which sort of outcomes the client's looking for. Only then can you start to optimize how you're going to manage the deployments where it's occurring, and so on and so forth.
Excellent. Thank you, Evan. And I think you put the technology back in technology business research after the rest of us spent the entire time talking about the business side of things. But again, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you to the analyst team. Thank you to the special guests. Thank you to Haley. And we have more webinars coming up, including another one where we talk about what we're going to be covering in particular, not just our predictions for the space for 2023, but what our research agenda is going to look like. So please tune in for that one. Go to the website and you can find all the webinars and you can find the replays. Thank you, everybody.